Do you remember the first time someone made an impact on your life? This may be rather hard to do considering the fact that for most of us, this is something that may happen on a daily basis, and the specific details of exchanges with other people may start to fade into obscurity as time goes on. For others, this may not be happening at all. Hello again, my goats. It's Connor Nardin here, back at it again with another skill issue thingy thing, and as you can probably tell by now with my mysterious demeanor, I have just came off the heels of another one of my numerous rewatches of Neon Genesis Evangelion. Now, let me explain myself a bit. Every time I watch this series, I get more of a profound understanding of what the author Hideaki Anno was trying to get at. This dude managed to take some of the most convoluted concepts of reality and found a way to stuff them into the cockpits of aesthetically pleasing supermassive weapons for the defense of the human race. Which is a little funny considering the show was made with the intent of being some form of entertainment for the edgy teenagers of '95. At least, that's what it looked like on the surface. As you probably know by now, Neon Genesis Evangelion is much more grim than some kids running around in Tokyo 3 in giant mechs, and you'd be hard-pressed to claim that one could walk away from this show without some feeling that they've been affected in some way. To tie this back into what I'm trying to get at, this feeling that the creator left many of the fans with, in a weird way, was his way of impacting others, considering the fact that the vast majority of his fan base hasn't even met him. And that's something that has always lingered in the back of my mind when trying to understand what was going on with this show. But I have to admit that the thought hadn't truly manifested until now. It sort of made me realize, you have more of an impact than you think. I mean, even down to the most minute of interactions you've had with someone else, you've been shaped beyond basic comprehension, and the same can be said for those that have interacted with you. You see, I believe that we're all generally born on the same mental plane, more or less. You spawn in as an entirely new entity, albeit a mixture of your parents with whatever genetics are at play, and you start going through life as a series of perceptions and experiences that shape the fundamental being that you are, regardless of whether you're aware of it or not. For example, I believe that if literal twins were born, yet raised in separate environments, or even the same environment, but treated differently, they'd be completely different people. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, Ed boy, do you not realize that this is, I don't know, common sense? And to that I'd say, well, like, yeah, but like, no. I feel like we as a species don't give this concept as much realization as we probably should. And I'm basing that on the simple fact that people just don't talk about it much. Like, for example, if you poop in a public restroom and you don't make a sound, did you really poop? Does it really matter? But if you pooped in a fully occupied restroom and you blow it up like the 4th of July and everybody hears it, oh, now you gotta live the rest of your life down with the nickname Firecracker. Suddenly, you have a subconscious fear of restrooms. Now that I realize I'm just yapping at this point, I guess I could get on to the point that I'm trying to make. Everything that happens to you within the context of society bears more weight than one may realize, and it permanently leaves an impression causing you to become unrecognizable to yourself. This is the case of Shinji Ikari. If you, for some strange reason, haven't seen this show, I'd first have to ask, why the hell did you click this video? But if you want a quick synopsis of what the show is about, I guess I could try to explain it and condense it down for you a bit, but it's gonna be a whole lot. For those who have seen it, however, just stick with me for a bit. We'll just go through this sort of as like a quick refresher so everybody knows what's going on and everything can start to make a little bit of sense. In Neon Genesis Evangelion, the Earth has been devastated by a cataclysmic event called the Second Impact, which is what set the stage for the post-apocalyptic world and is now being attacked by the original inhabitants of the planet, the Angels. To counter them, a secretive organization called NERV develops giant humanoid robots called Evangelions, formerly referred to as Evas, which are piloted by select 14-year-olds called, appropriately, the children, each of them sharing a strange connection to the machines. The story centers on Shinji Ikari, a reluctant teenager summoned by his father, Gendo, who is the head of NERV. Shinji becomes the pilot of Eva Unit 1, joining fellow pilots Rei Ayanami, a reserved and enigmatic girl, and Asuka Langley Soryu, a bold and skilled pilot. Together, they face terrifying battles against the Angels, each fight revealing more about the dark secrets behind NERV, the true nature of the Evas, and the Angels' mysterious origins. Where this series truly shines is as a story story reaches its crescendo, Shinji and his teammates face intense physical and psychological challenges. Through haunting and surreal episodes, the story explores trauma, isolation, and the desperate need for human connection. As the line between reality and psychological introspection blurs, the series culminates in a profound and philosophical exploration of identity, purpose, and the pain of existence. Now, that's really just the spark notes of the story at hand, but there isn't really any need to go over every theme and detail within this series, as most should be able to follow along just fine with the concept I'm trying to get at. You see, in my own personal life, I used to find difficulty in discovering the meaning behind some of the things that I would experience as I dealt with other people, their beliefs, comments, and understandings in my day-to-day. That being things like someone making a comment on my clothes, whether it being good or bad, or those times when someone tells you that you're doing a good job, but internally things are no bueno. I won't say that I was just going through life without profound thought on anything, but it wasn't until I watched this show for the first time that the concept of existing and existing with others was utterly challenged. It has helped me understand that relationships you form aren't just some video game mechanic where the more you work on it, the better the material gains, but rather something favoring the characteristics of cellular refinement. As I mentioned earlier, I feel like that isn't talked about enough. I feel as though society should have made groundbreaking progress on this idea, considering the fact that Neon Genesis Evangelion was produced with such rich exploration of its themes in October of 1995. 2 months after I was born, by the way. Honestly, I don't know how to put my finger on it, but it sort of feels like we've regressed as a people in this regard. Like, I don't think any specific event is the root cause of this happening, but it feels as though as time progresses, we seem to put up our AT fields as a default, and thus it's further driving a wedge between being able to understand one another. Which, when you think about it, bringing everyone together is quite literally the concept of the show. Am I Gendo? I guess, in a way, I'm sort of performing my own human instrumentality project in efforts to at least see if I can have an impact on those of you that have found your way to this video. And on that note, if by the end of this video I have made an impact on you, I want you to let me know your thoughts on the matter in the comments down below so that others and myself can discuss. With that being said, just like Shinji, it's time to get back in the mech. When we are introduced to Shinji as he arrives at Tokyo 3, I see this as sort of a symbolism pointing to how we are brought into the world. Everything is foreign, but you have an understanding that something is required of you, and you have a goal to attain whether you know what it is or not. For me, I relate to Shinji rather well, considering how he is in the opening parts of the show, mainly due to his similar personality traits that we would share when I was much younger. Shy, reserved, and cautious. This made it easy for me to understand the feelings and thought patterns of Shinji had in his positions, and I'm willing to bet that many others watching at the time did as well. Hideaki knew to create a character such as this in order for the viewers to have a solid medium in order to experience the events that follow. Choosing someone that isn't necessarily a blank canvas, but more of an unfinished painting was a deliberate choice. Now, as a side note, I want to repeat again that I will either be skimming over or ultimately skipping past some of the more redundant and distinct events of the show in order to keep this narrative really concise. I'd hate to waste time on the fluff in between and would rather focus on the theme at hand, which is, how did others have an impact on Shinji Ikari? The first episode begins with Shinji being summoned to Tokyo 3 as he's been required to do so by his father. As Shinji arrives, he witnesses an angel attacking the city and catches a glimpse of something. As the city is under siege, the military and all its assets appears to be powerless against the angel's destructive force, indirectly showing Shinji that the sheer might of the angel and the threat that it poses to his life. After the ever so carefree Misato Kachiragi arrives to pick up Shinji and take him to NERV headquarters, it's there where Shinji learns that his father wants him to pilot Ava Unit 1. He is now required to fight the very thing he just got done risking his life over to even get to NERV in the first place. Shinji is reluctant, he's feeling unprepared and unwilling to confront such a terrifying responsibility, especially since his father has been emotionally distant and seemingly cold towards him all his life. How dare he ask this of me after everything? What a jarring thing to try to comprehend, especially coming from somebody you're told by society that you're supposed to hold in high regard. Such an act would surely make it clear that others may just want to use you for their own personal gains without offering any value to you in return. Actually, in this particular case, Shinji is simply looking to at least have his existence be validated by way of his father. For even coming at all, he's put into an absolutely mental position, and expected to cover his father's end of the transaction in addition to his own. Thus begins Shinji's dive into self-doubt and skepticism towards future events. So Shinji initially refuses to pilot the Eva, and his father brings out Rei Ayanami as the backup pilot. Seeing Rei's tattered state, Shinji changes his mind and agrees to pilot the Eva despite his fear and inexperience. It's easy to become selfless in the name of someone else in this case, but it sort of begs the question in one's mind. What drives a person to do this in the first place? Why is it that, for the sake of someone seemingly less capable, some of us are willing to get in the mech? I'd wager that, like Shinji, you intuitively know what being in a state of disarray is like and expected to still perform in some manner. I'd say it feels morally gratifying to perform such an act and do one's duty as a participating member of society for the sake of others. He is looking for the reward in the relief of his inherent pain that his father has caused him, and he believes that it's the only way to happiness through this act of bravery and compliance, which he believes will win his father's love and affection. Now, if we look into this a bit further, we can see that this is actually the paradox of hedonism. So just for a sec, I gotta take y'all down a bit of a rabbit hole, so just bear with me here. The paradox of hedonism, also referred to as the pleasure paradox, refers to the practical difficulties encountered in the pursuit of pleasure. For the hedonist, constant pleasure seeking may not yield the most actual pleasure or happiness in the long term when consciously pursuing pleasure intervenes with experiencing it. Furthermore, as Viktor Frankl states in his book translated into Man's Search for a Meaning, happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue, and it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself. To put it simply, in looking to achieve a state of pleasure or meeting a goal, we tend to prioritize the end result, the goal itself, over our own satisfaction at the present. Oh fuck. Which likely is not going to come to fruition to one's desired degree due to the fact that they may overlook enjoying the moment in order to do so. This postulation perfectly describes Shinji's dilemma at the moment. All within a few moments, Shinji makes a decision that he does in context of the things happening to him, or more specifically, what is expected by him by others because of the pursuit of happiness is so deeply rooted within his mauled psyche that he begins to do things subconsciously in efforts to appease those that hold the keys to his contentment, regardless of comfort or happiness he would rather have in the moment. Going forward, Gendo continues to have a cold and unyielding presence in Shinji's life. His reaction to Unit 1's Berserk mode is one of satisfaction, as he views the Eva solely as a powerful weapon, functionally disregarding Shinji's presence or well-being within the Eva. Gendo's lack of empathy and focus on the Evangelion's combat effectiveness further alienates Shinji, reinforcing his sense of inadequacy and abandonment. Gendo's distant and utilitarian view of Shinji as a tool subtly suppresses Shinji, adding to his confusion and resentment. As you can probably tell by now, Shinji is introduced to a petrifying situation, and this is all at the behest of those that surround him. It has begun to make him feel like his own thoughts, feelings, and desires in the matter pale in comparison to what others expect from him. This would likely cause anyone to feel the same way in his shoes, alone and invalidated. Which brings us to the next part, where Shinji begins finding these nuggets of human connection with the other characters, which help him have a better understanding of the evolving situation around him as the events of the story continue. Misato's role in Shinji's life grows as she decides to take him into her home. Attempting to provide a sense of normalcy and care, she becomes more of a complicated figure though for Shinji. While she genuinely wants to support him, she also has her own motives, as she is invested in his role as an Eva pilot. This conflict makes her a source of mixed emotions for Shinji, who appreciates her kindness but senses the weight of her expectations. Shinji's admiration for Misato grows as he sees her courage and sense of duty in action, and her candid expression of frustration with Nerve's power struggles strengthens his connections with her. Misato's willingness to personally intervene in the Jet Alone crisis episode showcases her bravery and commitment, inspiring Shinji to trust and admire her even more. Her ability to handle high-stakes situations with courage impresses Shinji, and when she opens up about her feelings towards Nerve's political landscape, he begins to have a deeper understanding of her personal challenges. Misato's dedication of her dislike of Nerve makes Shinji feel more connected to her as he realizes that she too struggles with the organization's moral ambiguities. Ritsuko, the head scientist at NERV, begins to emerge as a significant influence in Shinji's surroundings as well. Her scientific and almost clinical approach to analyzing the Eva and the battle adds to the eerie atmosphere of NERV, making Shinji's position feel more like an experiment rather than a role he chose. Ritsuko's detached interest in the Eva's power gives Shinji a sense that there are secrets about the Evangelions and about himself that he is not being told. This makes Shinji much more hesitant to simply just press on, further driving confusion of his purpose. The Eva's independent reactivation is terrifying and leaves Shinji with a sense of helplessness, as he realizes he lacks full control over the machine he's supposed to pilot. This revelation about the Eva's nature introduces Shinji to the darker, mysterious side of his role and leaves him feeling vulnerable and traumatized. The experience with Unit 1 ultimately plants the seeds of Shinji's fear and reluctance to continue piloting, as he comes to realize the enormous emotional and physical toll it will demand. Shinji's experience at school highlights his isolation, as most of his classmates view him with suspicion or awe, not understanding the sacrifices and trauma involved with piloting the Evangelion. It makes him feel more like an outsider. His classmates' reactions make him question whether he can ever relate to others on a normal human level, given his unique and painful responsibilities. On the topic of school, Shinji also meets Toji and Kintsuke. Toji initially resents Shinji because he blames him for his sister's injury, which happened during one of Shinji's previous battles against an angel. This resentment manifests as anger, and Toji even physically confronts Shinji at school. The hostility deepens Shinji's guilt and self-doubt about the collateral damage caused by his actions as an Eva pilot. However, after witnessing Shinji's struggle and courage in battle, Toji gains respect for him and apologizes, offering Shinji some reassurance and a glimpse of friendship. Kintsuke, in contrast to Toji, is rather fascinated by Shinji's role and is one of the first people immediately related to Shinji that shows awe and admiration rather than suspicion, resentment, or like an expectation. His presence also allows Shinji to get a glimpse of what he could have in terms of a connection and camaraderie, which contrasts with his usual loneliness and fear. This budding friendship becomes a small but significant source of support. Shinji then grows increasingly curious about Rei Ayanami and witnesses some more of the complex relationships and dynamics concerning his father. As Shinji continues to reach out to Rei, he ends up with a handful of his mom's Rei's boob, and any attempts at conversations are met with her distant and impassive responses. She seems unaffected by her surroundings or the awkward situation itself. Rei's stoicism and dedication to her role impact Shinji profoundly. Her unwavering loyalty to Gendo and the lack of personal desires puzzle him, especially since she approaches her duties without hesitation or any apparent fear, a full contrast to Shinji himself. Gendo's uncharacteristic warmth towards Rei in contrast to his coldness towards Shinji, it stirs his jealousy, it stirs his confusion and the hurt in Shinji. Gendo's preference for Rei over his own son makes Shinji feel emotionally rejected, heightening his resentment. At the same time, Shinji feels pressure to gain his father's approval, and Rei's connection with Gendo makes him wonder if he too should be more like her, obedient and dutiful. Over time, Shinji's relationship with Rei evolves from distant curiosity to mutual respect and connection. Rei's selflessness and commitment inspire Shinji to push past his fears, and their teamwork during an operation to fend off another angel allows him to see her as both a capable pilot and a person capable of kindness and empathy. This teaches him that he too may be able to accomplish such a feat should he be willing to dig deep enough. During this time of the show too, it also reinforces the ongoing themes of the desire for connection, showing how even in the face of immense danger, small moments of understanding can provide comfort and motivation. Shinji then finds himself looking quite dapper in the cockpit of another Eva, one that belongs to the brash and seemingly overconfident Asuka Langley Soryu. Their polarized personalities immediately cause tension, leaving Shinji surprisingly intrigued actually. Have the recently formed bonds with the others started to give him a new outlook on meeting new people? Her strong personality forces him to confront his own insecurities as a pilot, especially when she criticizes his abilities. Asuka's skills and confidence challenge Shinji's belief in himself and push him to consider improving as a pilot. Her brashness is frustrating for Shinji, but he finds himself somewhat drawn to her fiery nature despite their frequent clashes. Asuka's arrival marks a turning point for Shinji, as he now has a peer who embodies qualities he lacks but sometimes admires. Misato's confidence in both of them provides Shinji with a sense of reassurance, but she also subtly challenges him to be more assertive around Asuka, hinting that he has the potential to be a better pilot. Later on, Shinji learns the value of teamwork and compromise as he and Asuka work through their differences to achieve a common goal. The synchronization training pushes him outside of his comfort zone, teaching him about the importance of trust, coordination, and patience when working closely with others. While Asuka's competitive nature remains a source of tension, Shinji's experience with synchronized combat marks a step forward in his maturity and personal growth, helping him see the potential benefits of collaboration even with challenging personalities. They also face a unique challenge when they are sent on a mission to capture an angel that has yet to fully develop. Asuka's boldness contrasts with Shinji's caution, and their mission deepens their understanding of each other and other strengths and weaknesses. Shinji's choice to rescue Asuka helps him grow as a pilot, showing him that he has the strength to protect others when needed. Meanwhile, Asuka's struggle with vulnerability and pride adds complexity to their partnership, setting the stage for further developments in their relationships as Eva pilots. Later on in the show, his kiss with Asuka leaves him with mixed feelings, as he grapples with his own loneliness and need for love. On that topic, shortly after meeting Asuka, he meets Kaji. Kaji's presence affects Shinji indirectly as he observes Misato's reactions to Kaji and picks up on the complicated nature of adult relationships. Something I imagine Shinji has little to no iota of prior to this situation, considering the fact that he hasn't been able to see such things from his mother or his father. Shinji then gets to see the sacrifices and personal motivations that drive NERV's members, particularly Misato, whose past experiences shape her dedication to fighting the angels. Learning about Misato's history and witnessing the intensity of the mission gives him a new appreciation for the personal sacrifices made by those around him. Through the success of a high-risk operation and his admiration for Misato's determination, Shinji begins to understand the deeply personal stakes involved in protecting humanity, reinforcing his resolve to fight and the bonds that has formed with his teammates. This idea is further strengthened by the unseen but critical work by NERV's staff to protect the organization from non-physical threats. The crisis with the Magi virus introduces Shinji to a complex personal histories and emotional burdens carried by Ritsuko and the rest of the crew. Through Ritsuko's connection to her mother and the legacy of the Magi system, Shinji gains insight to the weight of responsibility that drives those who aren't pilots, people who can't necessarily relate to him. Forced to navigate the powerless city, Shinji, Asuka, and Rei experience a new level of reliance on one another. Shinji's respect for both Asuka's determination and Rei's calm demeanor grows, as he sees firsthand how their strengths complement his own. The Blackout Crisis ultimately brings the team closer, reinforcing their bond as pilots and highlighting their collective resilience in the face of overwhelming obstacles. When the trio eventually makes it into the bay where they can be loaded into the Eva, Shinji learns that his father had been working relentlessly in order to provide a way for them to do so. Ritsuko alludes to the fact that Gendo for once had faith in Shinji, betting that he would make it there no matter what. Shinji is now seeing the effects of his actions as of late and seeing that things can change if you're willing to put in the effort to do so. Now, earlier in the show, we also come across the Hedgehog's dilemma, an idea originally coined by German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. Now, many of you have heard about the Hedgehog's dilemma before. Let me just explain it really quick. He states that on a cold winter's day, a number of porcupines huddle together quite closely in order through their mutual warmth to prevent themselves from being frozen. But they soon felt the effect of their quills on one another, which made them again move apart. Now, when the need for warmth once more brought them together, the drawback of the quills was repeated so that they were tossed between two evils, until they had discovered the proper distance from which they could best tolerate one another. Thus, the need for society, which springs from the emptiness and monotony of men's lives, drives them closer. But their many unpleasant and repulsive qualities and insufferable drawbacks once more drive them apart. The mean distance which they finally discover, and which enables them to endure being together, is politeness and good manners. Whoever does not keep to his is told in England to keep his distance. By virtue thereof, it is true that the need for mutual warmth will only be imperfectly satisfied, but on the other hand, the prick of the quills will not be felt. Yet, whoever has the great deal of internal warmth of his own will prefer to keep away from society, in order to avoid giving or receiving trouble or annoyance. With the people that Shinji met leading up to the moment at the train station, he gets quite a serious dose of this. This is a fairly easy concept to grasp and accept as true. To put it plainly, the closer you get to others, the more you may find yourself uncomfortable due to their nature as a person. And thus, keeping a nice distance is the solution to our dilemma of living in a shared space. I find myself wanting to believe that there's something more to us than simply living together, and not being able to find a way to build a profound understanding of each other, regardless of whether we agree on things or not. It feels as though that's part of the bigger picture of the human race, and I fear we may not be able to progress as a people if we don't set aside our differences. What is the point of an objective truth if someone isn't willing to get over the pain of accepting that truth? Not to get too political, but take the recent presidential election in America, for example. It ultimately didn't matter who did or said what in regards to reality, because both sides believed they were far too wounded from the quills to accept the other person's perspective. No one spent time trying to come to common ground, and rather decided to strengthen their proverbial AT fields due to this. As a result, there was destined to be a losing team. One side was destined to be impacted by the will of others. And this, in my opinion, means we have truly lost the plot. This is something that I noticed in Shinji's interaction, as he craves connection yet fears the pain that comes with it. Through his brief moments of connections with the others around him, Shinji ultimately decides to stay in Tokyo 3 after trying to run away under the pressure of it all. He understands what's required of him, though his inner turmoil remains unresolved, which I may have to admit points to a flaw in my belief. What do we do to ease that pain? What can I expect to come from a world where we overlook our differences in order to become closer without accounting for the damage that it would cause? I don't think I can expect the average person to be able to adopt such an idea willingly, especially considering the fact that it's already hard enough to get people to realize their own faults. This whole concept sheds light on Shinji's internal struggle with loneliness and self-worth, yet the desire for acceptance. Now, considering where he started and where Shinji appears to be now, everything seems to be going rather well for Shinji, considering where he began this journey emotionally. This is until he comes across the 12th angel in the 16th episode, Leliel. In a rather triggering event, Shinji gets absorbed into the angel's sack and is subject to utter isolation from the world. During this experience, Shinji has a talk with the person he least expected to, himself. The other him begins the conversation with the idea that there are two versions of oneself, the Shinji that he himself envisions and the him that he fears the most, the Shinji that others perceive. You see, this is where the show started to connect with me on a personal level, and may well be the very reason I decided to put this video together. In my own experience, I have always only known the me that exists inside of me. All of my thoughts, all of my emotions, all of my opinions, and especially all of my perceptions of others. It is quite literally the only reference we have for understanding the shared experience that we as a species have come to call a conscious. Seemingly the only thing we have absolute control over. But is that actually true? If you actually consider this, it's a harrowing thing to think about the idea that you may not have as much autonomy as you think. I can say for sure that no one was involved with my decision to wear the outfit that I've decided to put on today. I show up to family events and ensure that I'm doing the best that I can so that everyone is proud of me. The music I listen to around friends is a playlist that I've specifically curated to my own personal taste. This sort of goes back to the pleasure paradox that I brought up earlier too, now that I think about it. It seems like a lot of us are just doing things in an indirect way in order to ensure that we are accepted by society, whether we notice it or not. To add, the things we believe others may think of us or their version of ourselves is something that we fundamentally have no control over, no matter how much we try to sway other people's perceptions of ourselves, including ourselves. This makes us fearful of something a bit below the surface that is much harder to come to terms with. Going back to how the show portrays this, the other Shinji tells the original that the Shinji that exists within the minds of others can vary wildly from which he would like to believe, and that it is not the fear that is being accepted by others, but rather the pain that comes with it. You can brace for impact all you want, but pain is pain no matter who you are. This is a feeling that we are all likely familiar with. It is the driving factor behind why we do a lot of the things we think we do of our own volition. It's just that it's not something that we are willing to admit, even to ourselves, and to that point, we may have lost the plot and or purpose behind these things and associate the daily dealing of life with this feeling. It may be where that fear of returning to work on Monday, expecting something that you messed up on Friday is going to come back, and now that, affects you, you're afraid of that. Or meeting your spouse's parents for like the millionth time, even though you know them very well and they know you, it can still be quite terrifying. Digging a little further, as Shinji's conversation with himself continues, we get a bit more of an interesting introspection. He suggests that it isn't his fault that he is fearful of being hurt, it's his father. It's Gendo's fault that Shinji is messed up like this, but in trying to reconcile with that thought, he reverts to the idea that, sadly, no, it's still his fault. This is until he realizes how Asuka would scold him about apologizing for everything. He, of course, still tries to say that it's because he believes he can't do anything right until, again, he thinks about how Misato's compassion would have him believe that it's just his perception of reality that makes him feel that way. It is not necessarily anyone else's. When he considers his feelings for his father whenever he recalls that one time that he's done a good job, he rejoices in light of this. The other Shinji, though, reminds him that he shouldn't hold on to that one morsel of success for the rest of his life, because he needs to be able to congratulate himself in order to live a life to its fullest extent without the necessity of others. More importantly, the other Shinji tells him that he needs to be able to accept that pain of not always being perfect, and to stop always running away into himself. This encounter concludes with triumph after receiving a glimpse of his mother's love. Eventually, at a pivotal moment in Shinji's journey, he is forced to confront the darkness within Nerve and the consequences of piloting the Eva. The betrayal by Gendo, the forced violence through the dummy plug system, and the realization that his friend was put in harm's way without his knowledge breaks Shinji's spirit. He's left traumatized, grappling with guilt, rage, and disillusionment towards this authority. He's no longer able to overlook the organization's manipulation and disregard for the well-being of its pilots. After the awakening from the battle with Zeruel, the Angel, Shinji is yet again subject to another internal conversation while within the cockpit of the Eva. Only now he has become fully liquid. This time, we are shown a subliminal understanding of each different person that greets Shinji. Each different person's greeting symbolizes the Shinji that exists within the mind of others. Sort of a hint to Shinji's previous conversation with himself. He pictures those around him that have brought him comfort up until this point, while also recognizing those that are his enemies. He spends some of this time justifying that doing what he does to his enemies is necessary so that he may protect those around him, eventually stumbling into the conclusion that he also sees his father as the enemy, despite previously feeling as though he is living up to Gendo's standards. Again, I feel as though this is very unfortunate for Shinji's experience during all of this. Even after successfully performing the task required of him, he still has been betrayed. Even after overcoming the part of his own personal problems that have been holding him back from growing, by taking some control over his life, he learns that it has all been for the benefit of someone else, and in this case, it's for an enemy. One of the more complicated parts of doing things for others is the fact that there are often times when what we do goes unnoticed, or even worse, backfires. It's hard not to lose track of the overall goal we've been trying to accomplish when this happens. It feels like maybe the work we put into it isn't worth it. We find ourselves contemplating the purpose of it all, yet we may never be able to find the answer to this our entire lives, and thus, in efforts to cope, we just start the cycle again. We begin to see Shinji's psychological and emotional decline. His sense of alienation, guilt, and growing despair as he continues to struggle with his identity as an Ava pilot. The battle with Saihekyo, while externally a success, only deepens Shinji's internal turmoil as he begins to question the meaning of his role and his existence. The emotional disconnect between Shinji and Misato serves as a key element of his growing isolation, reinforcing the idea that Shinji is ultimately alone in his emotional struggles, even as he is forced to continue fighting. This further develops Shinji's character as someone who is increasingly overwhelmed by the demands placed upon him and unsure of whether his actions can lead to any true resolution or peace. When Shinji meets Kaworu, we revisit the idea of the hedgehog's dilemma for a bit. This time, the focus is only the loneliness that comes with avoiding getting close to others for comfort. Just before meeting Kaworu, Shinji is going over the fact that all of those that he holds dear to himself has gone away, and everyone that is left over is technically just a lost cause in his mind. This makes him feel lonely, and maybe even as if everything that is happening to him is causing him to go back to how things were when he first arrived. Kaworu overrides this discomfort by being charming and knowing exactly what to say and how to appear to Shinji. Again, Shinji feels understood, as there's actually still seems to be someone that can relate to him. In this case, the bond is instantly sound. Of course, when things go this smoothly, by now we can all expect things are too good to be true. Turns out, Kaworu is the 17th angel, another enemy. Thinking more about this as Shinji confronts Kaworu, their conversation about the nature of Lilin, or humans, shows some imagery of the hedgehog's dilemma as well. That one time Shinji didn't have his guard up when meeting someone new, he was betrayed in the most direct sense possible. And situations such as this usually lead to an unsavory decision one has to make. To add, Kaworu notions that he believes someone has to live on and finds comfort in allowing it to be Shinji's species that inhabits the earth instead of his own. This shows an unprecedented amount of compassion that Shinji has never seen anyone have, and it leaves him conflicted. Do you forgive this person and let them become part of your world? Or do you cut this person out of your life, allowing you to go on living as you were? Now we reach the height of the show's message, and as confusing as the last 2 episodes of the series were received, it's actually kind of funny to me considering how basically it laid everything out in much more plain sight rather than symbolism throughout the show. In the first bit of episode 25, Shinji continues to struggle with the idea of ending another person. We know that it is the right thing to do, especially considering it's for the sake of others' lives, but the conflict lies within knowing you have impacted another who has also had aspirations of their own. What I'm trying to get at here is that in our own lives, we sort of do this in a million different ways. From telling someone you no longer want to be friends so that you don't have to have uncomfortable encounters, to having to let go of that one team member for the benefit of everybody else that actually does their job. These things are, in the long run, placing someone in the enemy category of your mind, and this is what brings a deeper feeling of discomfort that we rarely recognize. We try to cover up this emotion with some form of stoicism by going on and showing that we are not bothered by having to make these decisions. But at the end of the day, we are only Lilin. Honing in on this emotion, it only becomes complex because of how complicated relationships are, and understanding the nuance between them causes us to feel as though we are making the wrong decision. Did this person actually do something wrong? Am I wrong for not giving them time to correct their ways? We know that we are trying our best in order to be accepted by others. It is only rational to assume that others would like to be accepted as well. Yet, they do things that are unacceptable anyways, which sort of dives a bit more into the unknown, something humans are not very fond of. Well, what can we do about this? In my opinion, it may be that these are moments we have to use to teach others things they may not have ever had the opportunity to learn about themselves. It could be that it is unfortunately another thing that we have to add to the list of things that are required from us from society. And before we go on, I get it, you know? It sort of feels like it shouldn't be your job to teach others things that are common sense or things that they should know. But I sort of look at it like this. Think back to the times, if any, where you are being told by someone that you are doing something that the vast majority of those around you don't like. Best thing I can think of is when you're a child having to learn the proper mannerisms of the world, and your parents have to practically show you everything, or else you grow up to be an absolute outsider. That is something no one inherently tries to be. Would it have been fair for them to assume you learn these things somehow on your own? I personally wrestle with the concept often. Something that someone does makes me and everyone around them uncomfortable. Is it really fair for me to cut this person out and let them go on living like this? And before I close out this thought, I have a question that I believe we may all have a myriad of varying answers to. What is the next step after showing something uncomfortable to another person and they continue to do it? Again, let me know what you guys think about that in the comments below. After witnessing Asuka's crash out, we are shown some of the thoughts within the psyche of others. A departure from Shinji at this point. Rei tells herself that she too has multiple versions of herself that exist in others, and she has the tailored version that she wants others to perceive. She has done everything to ensure that people see she is of some worth. The other Rei that she is talking to retaliates and asks if she realizes that this is just a forgery, a product of what others need her for. The original Rei believes that she is only the experiences that she has had and the connections that she has made and nothing more. The other Rei insists that regardless of that, the real her exists separately and continues on by saying that she is rather afraid of the idea that there is no real her. This Rei is the one that will disappear from within others' minds as time progresses, something only we can hold value to. The original goes on to say that she has a desire to return to the void, but it is because of those that require her to be here that she continues to exist. This is due to the longing for despair that we keep prolonging in our daily lives by doing everything for others. Going a bit further, Misato argues with Ritsuko that forcing people to become one, or more plainly, forcing people to care for one another is wrong. Ritsuko responds basically saying that this is what we already desire inside. Going back to before when I asked, what is the next step after telling someone about themselves? I believe this is where forcing people to care falls into play. We already don't just let people do whatever they want by way of imprisonment or exile. This exile can come in the forms of taking away one's privilege of being accepted by others, whether it'll be constant ridicule, literal capture, or in some cases, death. Which is again, something we assume others care about. This cacophony continues, eventually hitting on the idea that we crave each other's hearts. We crave being with others because that is the best way for survival. It is scary to try to do everything for yourself or survive on your own. The common goal of succession for the human race often goes unspoken because it is in our nature to understand the plight of one another, wanting to avert the fear of being alone based on an assumption. The assumption is the substitute that we have chosen instead of dealing with the pain others cause and directly addressing the tangible problems that they are dealing with. This assumption, I believe, is the antithesis of the human race. This is what Mr. Ano was trying to portray at the end of it all. You are required to find the worth of your own life within yourself. Everything and everyone that you touch and interact with becomes a part of you, and how you choose to portray or express yourself is something only you can do. To put it plainly, you really just gotta do you. The assumption is what's getting in the way of us realizing this. We assume that everyone is looking within themselves for their own answers, but there is no way we can assume that because, well, you is not me. We choose to exist among each other because we would otherwise have no sense of self. Without pain and suffering, there can be no love and happiness. Without you, there is no me. I have no way of knowing what you are truly dealing with and vice versa. But the least I can do is help you understand the parts of you that you don't see so that you can maybe better understand yourself. This is because I understand the fear of not being able to meet society's expectations. This is because I simply want to do my duty as being a part of society. So to you, I am an outside force, but just the simple action of knowing I exist alters your reality to some degree. And in realizing this, I have seized the opportunity of this phenomena by trying to bring something to your attention that you may or may not have realized. So as a parting gift, I just want to reiterate that the show ultimately concludes with the idea that your surroundings are what you make out of it. You are the only person that has control over that. You can look at a rainy day as gloomy and sad, or you can look at it as an opportunity to hone that skill you can only really do indoors. You can negatively ponder on what little progress you've made in your life, or you can consider the fact that you are wise enough to at least notice you've got some work to do. The people that surround you want you to succeed, and that may very well be why they choose to surround themselves with you. And for those who don't have others in their life that you feel like you can connect with, feel free to join our Discord.